So, what else is there? Well, whoa. Hi, my friends call me Lime, and in this series we discuss why I and so many Christians believe that the homo-friendly interpretations of the Bible make a lot more sense than the homo-negative ones. And in the last episode of this series, we looked at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, and we concluded that if stories about men raping women don't mean that heterosexuality is wrong, then stories about men attempting to rape other men don't mean that homosexuality is wrong. However, there are parts elsewhere in the Bible referencing the sins of Sodom, giving us more clues as to what they were. And of course, the homo-negative side argues that some of these passages outright says that the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were punished because of homosexuality. And they argue that, pointing to Jude 1, 6-7 and 2 Peter 2, so I and Jesper Svartvik, professor of theology of religions at Lund University and at the Swedish Theological Institute in Jerusalem, we took a look at them. In this series, we're going to analyze every passage in the Bible that people use to try to argue against homosexuality, and we're going to look at why I and so many Christians believe that the homo-friendly interpretations make more sense. And the first one that I want to mention is Jude 1, 6-7 that says, "And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their own home, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire." So, first of all, when investigating what they mean by sexual immorality, I found that a few translations instead writes fornication, which means sex outside of marriage. However, the fact that so many translators rather go with a much more general translation, sexual immorality, indicates that there is some uncertainty as to what the original word really means. And I mean, if we're not sure, the conclusion should be exactly that, rather than especially because even if it means fornication, let's just for argument's sake say that is what it means, then that is only homo-negative if gays can't get married. So then let them get married. I mean, you certainly can't use this passage to argue against gay marriage. And second of all, what about perversion? Well, Svartvik says that perversion was translated from this. And look at what he says. Heteras, meaning going after different flesh. And the second passage that people use to argue for homonegativity comes from 2 Peter 2:6 in combination with 2 Peter 2:9-11 that says, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, if this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to hold the unrighteous for punishment on the day of judgment. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desires of the flesh and despise authority. Bold and arrogant, they are not afraid to heap abuse on celestial beings. Yet even angels, although they are stronger and more powerful, do not heap abuse on such beings when bringing judgment on them from the Lord. Corrupt desires can mean anything, so one must think about what it actually means. And the text actually continues with eyes full of adultery, they never stop sinning, they seduce the unstable, they are experts in greed. So these men only had eyes for adulterous women. This passage isn't about homosexuality either. And let me also reconnect with something that we talked about before. Now, I can't draw any conclusions from this, but adultery fits the definition of both sexual immorality and fornication. Right. I had more things to say. So far, we've seen the fate of Sodom being blamed on adultery, boldness, arrogance, abuse of angels. So, what else is there? Well, here, Zion is compared with Sodom because of injustice, oppression, and meaningless offerings. And here, Jerusalem is compared with Sodom because of the adultery and strengthening the hands of evildoers. And here it says that Jerusalem is worse than Sodom. And there's a quote right here that says, "Now this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore I did away with them, as you've seen." Still nothing about homosexuality. In fact, we have more reason to blame eating too much then we have to blame homosexuality. But we don't see people go around calling obese people sodomites, which we of course should still not do. So then, how come this passage is being used to argue against homosexuality when it would be more reasonable to use it to argue against, well, any of these other things? Well, Svartvik has an answer.
His name was Peter Damian, Petrus Damianus in Latin. He lived some 1,000 years ago, and we have reasons to believe that he was the first person who coined the expression sodomy and gave it an interpretation. This is what sodomy is all about, which means that it only goes halfway to the New Testament, and it only goes 1/3 almost way back to the text when it was written down.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Orally presented, transmitted, and then written down. So for perhaps 1,500 years, who knows how old the text is, the text was not filled with that interpretation.
So then, how did the early readers of the text interpret it? Well, I did touch on that a little bit at the beginning of this series. Roughly put, one of the things that they did wrong was to think of people being in only one way. They used a story to illustrate that, a story criticizing the idea that if you don't fit the bed, then your legs should be prolonged or cut off so that you do fit the bed. Which to me, by extension, means that Therapy aimed to fit you into the right sexuality is kind of closer to sodomy than being gay is. Now, I don't know when, but I am planning to make a video talking more about what these early readers interpreted the sins of Sodom to be, and I might actually read more into how this Peter Damian person invented the term sodomy, but that is for another video. For now, thank you so much for watching. Bye.